Hollywood built its empire selling fantasies, but behind the closed doors of dressing rooms hid secrets no studio wanted to reveal. Strange objects, evidence of vices, and items so bizarre they defied all explanation. When the lights went out and the cameras stopped rolling, those small private rooms told stories that never made the headlines. Today we are going to open those forbidden doors. Marlene Dietrich demanded that every dressing room she occupied have the largest refrigerator available at the studio. Executives assumed it was for storing champagne or caviar, but the reality was far more peculiar. The German diva stored the flower bouquets that audiences threw at her after each performance. She kept them cold so she could reuse them at the next show, night after night, until the petals finally wilted. Cleaning staff reported finding dozens of bouquets in various states of decay every time she left a production. But that was not all. Her dressing rooms were decorated with authentic zebra hides that she personally transported from set to set. Monumental mirrors covered every wall because Dietrich needed to see herself from every possible angle before taking a single step in front of the cameras. Lighting technicians received precise instructions on exactly how light should fall in her private space. The strangest thing was her arrival ritual. Before allowing any personal item to touch the surfaces, Dietrich personally cleaned every corner of the dressing room from top to bottom. The most glamorous woman in cinema would kneel with rags and cleaning products, scrubbing every corner until the space met her standards of perfection. No one at the studio understood this obsession, but no one dared question it. When cleaning staff entered Marilyn Monroe's dressing room at Fox Studios, they always found the same scent floating in the air. A bottle of Chanel No. 5 remained open on her vanity at all times, permeating every corner with its characteristic fragrance. It was her way of marking territory, of making any space feel like her own. But next to the perfume were far less glamorous objects that told a different story. Bottles of sleeping pills lined up next to bottles of wake-up pills. The studio provided her with both, creating a cycle Marilyn could never escape. In her vanity drawers were found dozens of pharmacy receipts, all under fake names, all from the same pharmacy at Schwab's. The pharmacy employees recognized her but kept silent, like everyone did in those days. Years after her passing, 2 metal filing cabinets that had remained hidden for decades appeared. They contained love letters, correspondence with powerful figures in politics and entertainment, and documents the studio had tried to destroy without success. The contents of those filing cabinets remain a matter of speculation to this day, and some historians believe they would reveal connections many would prefer to keep buried. John Harlow's dressing room smelled of industrial chemicals. To maintain her legendary platinum hair, her personal stylist mixed a formula that would have horrified any doctor. Hydrogen peroxide, ammonia, laundry bleach, and soap flakes. This toxic mixture was applied weekly to her scalp. Technicians who passed near her dressing room during the dyeing process often complained of dizziness and nausea. The penetrating smell seeped under the door and traveled through the studio hallways. Harlow endured the burning with stoicism because she knew her hair was her trademark. Over time, entire clumps began to fall out. The studio had to provide emergency wigs that were kept in special boxes inside the dressing room. Some historians believe that the constant inhalation of those chemicals contributed to the health problems that led to her premature passing at 26 years old. Clara Bow, the it girl of the 20s and the first true movie star, made the mistake of trusting her secrets to the wrong person. Her personal secretary, Daisy DeVoe, had total access to her dressing room and every private document it contained. For years, DeVoe was her confidant, her hairdresser, and her manager. When the relationship soured over money disputes, DeVoe fled with suitcases full of compromising material. Diamond jewelry worth thousands of dollars, sapphire rings, insurance policies, canceled checks, unpaid bills, and dozens of love letters from the most famous men in Hollywood. Everything had been carelessly stored in the drawers of Clara's dressing room, and everything ended up in the hands of her former employee who did not hesitate to use it as a weapon. The trial that followed in 1931 exposed every intimate detail of Clara's life to a scandal-hungry public. Newspapers published content from the letters, details of her extravagant spending, and rumors about her love life that included actors, directors, and even professional athletes. The scandal destroyed her career and forced her to retire before turning 30, spending the rest of her life on a ranch far from Hollywood. Joan Crawford was a board member of Pepsi-Cola after marrying the company's president. This affiliation manifested obsessively in every dressing room she occupied. Refrigerators filled exclusively with Pepsi products. Glasses with the brand logo. Corporate napkins. It was impossible to find any other beverage in her private space. But there was something more unsettling. Crawford insisted on having dressing rooms adjacent to those of her rivals. When she arrived at Warner Brothers, she demanded the space next to Bette Davis. She constantly sent flowers and gifts through the dividing wall, all of which were returned unopened. Her daughter Christina described years later strange objects in her mother's private spaces. Candles that lit themselves, according to her words. Photographs of enemies with pins stuck in them. Diaries where she documented every offense, real or imaginary, that she had suffered throughout her career. Bette Davis's dressing room was the exact opposite of Joan Crawford's. While Crawford filled her space with glamour and beauty products, Davis kept hers almost Spartan. Work clothes hung without ceremony. Ashtrays overflowing with cigarette butts. Coffee-stained scripts covering every available surface. Studio technicians regularly found Crawford's return gifts piled by the door, still wrapped, with sarcastic notes written by Davis attached. The rivalry between both actresses manifested in every object that crossed the threshold between their dressing rooms. Davis kept something few knew about: photographs of Franchot Tone, the actor she had been in love with and who ended up marrying Crawford. Those images remained in a locked drawer for decades, silent evidence of a broken heart that fueled a legendary enmity. Judy Garland's dressing room at MGM was essentially a mobile pharmacy supervised by the studio itself. The studio provided her with amphetamines to keep her awake during filming days that could extend over 20 consecutive hours. Then they gave her barbiturates so she could sleep a few hours before waking up and starting the cycle again. This regimen began when she was barely 13 years old. The bottles were lined up in a special cabinet that only the studio doctor could open. Garland was forbidden to access them on her own, but technicians noticed she always found a way to get more. At 18 years old, in addition to the pills, the studio forced her to smoke 80 cigarettes daily to suppress her appetite. The young woman coughed constantly but kept smoking because they had told her it was the only way to maintain her figure. Internal memos circulated among executives every time Garland was seen eating something outside her prescribed diet. Her dressing room was essentially monitored around the clock. Every bite was reported. Every pound gained meant more pills, more pressure, more control over a young woman who just wanted to sing and be happy like any normal teenager. Elizabeth Taylor demanded that her dressing room be filled with fresh flowers every morning, but not just any flowers. Purple orchids specifically, imported and replaced daily regardless of cost. The scent had to be exact or the entire arrangement was rejected. Next to the flowers were jewelry boxes containing pieces valued in the millions. Taylor insisted on having her diamonds nearby at all times, including the famous diamond that bore her name. Studios hired additional guards just to watch her dressing room during filming. But there were also pill bottles similar to Garland's. Taylor described years later how the studio system kept her functioning with stimulants during the day and sedatives at night. The cycle began when she was barely a teenager, filming movies like Little Women. Jayne Mansfield's dressing room was decorated entirely in pink. Pink walls, pink furniture, pink curtains, pink rugs. But among all that exaggerated femininity were objects that would have scandalized the 1950s public. Mansfield maintained correspondence with Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan. Photographs of both of them together appeared in drawers that supposedly no one was supposed to open. Amulets and symbols that did not belong to any conventional religion decorated hidden corners of her private space. The actress also kept clippings of every article written about Marilyn Monroe. She obsessively studied her rival, noting in the margins posing techniques, facial expressions, and wardrobe tricks she could imitate. Her dressing room was essentially a shrine dedicated to becoming the next platinum blonde of Hollywood. Rita Hayworth was not born a redhead, nor was she born with that name. Her dressing room contained the implements of a painful transformation that the studio had imposed on her without giving her a choice. Aggressive dyes to change her natural dark color to that iconic red the world would come to love. But that was just the beginning of her metamorphosis forced by Hollywood executives. The studio decided her hairline was too low, giving her a forehead they considered insufficient for Hollywood beauty standards of that era. In her dressing room, electrolysis sessions were performed to permanently raise her hairline. The process was extremely painful and took more than a year to complete, session after session of electric needles destroying the follicles on her forehead. They also changed her name completely. Margarita Carmen Cancino disappeared to make way for Rita Hayworth, a name that sounded less ethnic to the ears of 1940s America. The documents of this identity change were kept in her dressing room as a constant reminder that the woman the public loved was a studio construction, not a real person with her own history and heritage. Tallulah Bankhead was known for receiving visitors in her dressing room, completely naked, without showing the slightest shame. Studio executives sent memos begging her to at least cover herself with a robe, but she systematically ignored them. Her dressing room reeked of bourbon and cigarette smoke. Empty bottles accumulated in corners because Bankhead refused to allow cleaning staff to enter during productions. She preferred to live among the chaos she herself created. She was openly bisexual at a time when such confessions could destroy careers. Letters from lovers of both genders mixed shamelessly in her correspondence. Photographs that would have caused monumental scandals were displayed without any protection on the walls of her private space. Louise Brooks abandoned Hollywood because the studio system interfered with what she considered her two great pleasures in life. Her dressing room reflected these priorities in an evident way to anyone who entered. Gin bottles occupied an entire shelf, organized by brand and aging as if it were a sommelier's collection. The rest of the space was dedicated exclusively to books, not scripts or entertainment industry magazines, but serious literature that most of her colleagues would never have understood. German philosophy, French poetry, European novels that defied conventions. Brooks read constantly between takes, ignoring castmates and executives alike, responding with monosyllables when they tried to make conversation. When the studio tried to control her personal life and dictate who she could and could not associate with, Brooks simply packed her books and her gin and disappeared from Hollywood without looking back. She moved to Europe where she could drink and read in peace, far from the monitored dressing rooms and impossible expectations the studio system imposed on its female stars. The dressing rooms of old Hollywood were microcosms of extraordinary lives lived under extraordinary pressure. Behind closed doors, the brightest stars in the firmament kept evidence of their struggles, their vices, their obsessions, and their darkest secrets. The studios knew perfectly well what was inside those small rooms, but as long as the movies generated millions in profits, everyone looked the other way and pretended not to see anything. Those private spaces contained truths the public was never supposed to know, stories that would have destroyed careers and ruined illusions until now. If you like this video, subscribe and hit the bell for more secrets from the dark side of Hollywood.